Ladies and gentlemen, the 2023 Las Vegas Grand Prix is over, and I know that this video is coming at you a little later than normal, but that's just because, these videos take a little longer to make, especially because we were actually there in Las Vegas to witness the 2023 Vegas Grand Prix for the first time since the 80s. I believe. And so I'm going to talk to you about what it was like to go into the, this reintroduction to F1 in Las Vegas. And then, of course, we'll go over our weekend quick hits, winners and losers, and predictions as well. Now, since this is coming a bit later, I think we're going to focus primarily on what the experience was like to go to the Las Vegas Grand Prix in person this year, rather than really talking about what happened in the race. Just because if this video comes out when I'm imagining it does, the race weekend will have been far and long over, and potentially the season also over. So I apologize if it's coming very late, but at the same time, I'm only one person trying to make this channel happen. So let's go ahead, let's jump on into it with what it was like to go to the Las Vegas Grand Prix in person, this first year of a potentially 10-year long contract with F1 in the city of Las Vegas to host a race there, seemingly in November. I wouldn't be surprised if that potentially changes out of November and flexes out of November, although at the same time, the weather in Vegas did provide us with an opportunity for some exciting on-track action, and I think the layout actually surprised people a lot. But let's go ahead. Let's start at the beginning. We were there from the Wednesday before the weekend began, and we ended up leaving the Monday afterwards, just giving it that little extra day after the race ended. So let the initial group of people leave, and then we made our way out the next day. So we get there on Wednesday, and we actually, when we booked these tickets in the hotels, we actually wasn't expecting the weekend to get started as quickly as it did. We got there on Wednesday, and obviously the opening ceremony was on Wednesday as well. Unfortunately, the grandstand tickets that we bought didn't allow us to go to the opening ceremony. But after what we saw of it online and the weather actually coming in as well, we actually probably wouldn't have wanted to go anyway. So the opening ceremony was exactly what you would expect. It's all about the show, all about the entertainment. It was, I think, 90% musical artists with about a 5-minute window where the drivers actually showed up. So it was what it was. A lot of people seem to enjoy it. I think if you were expecting it, it's exactly what you were expecting. And if you weren't sure what to expect, it's still probably what you imagined it might look like since it was being hosted in Las Vegas. So Wednesday, obviously things are starting to get a little ramped up. Thursday, the first day of actual on-track action. We are going to talk about what eventually happened in FP1, but that said, that wasn't until far later in the evening. I remember on Thursday waking up very excited to see and explore. We did a lot of walking around on Wednesday, but Thursday was our primary day of just kind of exploring, trying to see as much of the track as we could on foot. Before the sessions actually began that evening, we ended up doing a lot of walking, probably too much walking, if we're being entirely honest. But it was a lot of fun to explore the different casinos. Different teams had different things set up. We actually were staying at the Mirage, which apparently ended up being the Red Bull partner hotel. We did not know that when we booked it. We just were kind of booking a hotel close to the circuit and in a kind of good place, and ended up being the Mirage when it was all said and done. Obviously, we couldn't find the Haas partnered hotel. If they had one. I wish they did. I definitely would have campaigned to stay there. But nonetheless, let's go ahead. Let's jump into the sessions. And I mean, it was super exciting to walk around Vegas, see all of the F1 advertising and the pop-up shops. We ended up making our way over to the F1 shop over in the Venetian, which I think was kind of the primary central location for the F1 store, as well as making our way over to the Wynn and visiting the Lewis Hamilton Plus 44 shop that he had over there. We ended up getting a bit of merch from him as well. I really enjoyed the collection he released for this one, but it was very exciting. There were pop-ups and there were F1 tie-ins all over the place in Vegas, especially down towards that, northern end. The Wynn had a handful of different options, different pop-up shops, different F1, cars, show cars showing up. There was a lot of show cars in the Wynn. Specifically, there was a Red Bull show car outside of the Mirage and the Williams fan zone down by the New York casino. So it was very exciting. Pretty much everywhere you walked up and down the strip, you were basically inundated with F1. If you're a local, you probably were very tired of it. But as being the first full day there in Vegas, it was very exciting. Going into the evening now, we end up making our way over. We had tickets to the what was it, the T-Mobile Zone at Sphere, which is a mouthful to say, but we were in the Sphere Zone in the grandstands over there, and it actually ended up being quite a cool little area. We ended up cutting through the Venetian and essentially cutting around the Sphere on our way towards the fan zone they had over there, and it was very, very cool to get to basically walk right up to the Sphere, look up, and obviously see this giant, however many bulbs there are in that thing. It was very bright, and it was a lot of fun to actually follow along with it as the weekend progressed. But we ended up making our way around, doing some exploring. I would say in terms of amenities around the fan zone, there wasn't as much as I was expecting. We also attended the United States Grand Prix this year, and that compared to this was night and day different. The level of amenities, the level of fan interaction afterwards was definitely not the same. There was a musical stage over in that fan zone, so there was a lot of live music going on, which was nice. The food obviously was free, and non-alcoholic beverages were also free as well, which ended up being really, really nice. But that said, other than that, there really wasn't too much going on in terms of fan interaction. So that was a little disappointing. And it was very disappointing, especially for the fans who ended up hanging out after FP1 ended. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about it. We were in our seats ready for FP1 when obviously 9.5 minutes into FP1, Carlos Sainz's car ran over the drain hole cover that was ripped out of the ground, I believe by one of the Alpines, which caused a red flag and that the session would not be resumed. This was obviously a shock to everyone in attendance, and it was definitely not the way I'm sure F1 wanted their weekend to begin. It was very sudden. I think a lot of the fans, I think, understood after they saw the clip of Carlos's car running over that drain hole cover, but at the same time, only 9 minutes of on-track action was definitely not quite what we were all expecting, especially when there's been all of this lead up, and especially when the session is also at the end of the day. I believe that session started at 8:30. And gates opened at 6. So basically everyone waited all day to see 9 minutes of on-track action before they officially canceled that session. And at that point also, no one knew what was going to happen with FP2. Obviously, FP2 was going to start at midnight local time. We actually ended up leaving the track. I had a buddy who I grew up with back home who had moved out to Vegas a handful of months beforehand, and so he actually also had tickets to the Sphere Zone, and so we actually ended up leaving and heading down towards the old downtown Fremont Street, doing some exploring down there. It's the first time we've ever been over there, so we actually ended up just hanging out with one of my friends off track. And by the time we were heading back towards this strip, they still hadn't made any announcements about FP2 or about what was going to happen, and so we actually ended up just calling it there, cutting our losses, and going, okay, worst case scenario, we'll catch it on TV back at the casino where we were staying, in the hotel we were staying. Thankfully, I think that ended up being the correct choice, because not only was FP2 ending up being delayed until 2 a.m. local time, at 1:30 a.m. local time, F1 and the track officials made an announcement, I believe about a minute before it went into effect, saying that all spectators had to leave and they would not be allowed to watch FP2. I'm sure this is something that makes a lot of sense if you work behind the scenes. I think the biggest issue that we had with it is the fact that it was communicated basically at the last second, and there was absolutely no way that that's justifiable to basically anyone. There were a lot of people who stayed at the track. There were a lot of people who went back and hung out the entire time, and basically 30 minutes after a good 4 to 6 hours of being at the track waiting to see cars on track, they basically were told, no, you can't do that, go home, and tough luck. I believe they ended up sending out a $200 voucher to the F1 Vegas store for those who had a ticket to a non 3-day weekend ticket. I know my buddy ended up getting that voucher as well, but at the same time, that is in no way, shape, or form enough to justify what they actually ended up putting a lot of these fans through. And so who knows if anything is going to come of it down the line. Something might have already come of it by the time this video goes out. I believe anything I've seen. I've still never seen them say even that they apologize for the way things went and the things that were handled. So definitely not a bad look on F1 when, at least when it comes to the first day of the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend. But that said, at this point, I'm sure a lot of the F1 Vegas haters were loving life. As you know, there's a lot of people who I'm sure were just waiting for the Vegas, weekend to fail. And this was definitely the first instance that is definitely trending that way. And I think a lot of us are nervous going into day two, qualifying day, FP3 and qualifying day, that who knows if things are going to turn back around or if this is just an ill omen as we start the weekend. But at the same time, we had no regrets. We were there to get all the ups, all the downs as we head into qualifying day, which I was about to say qualifying Saturday, but it was not. On Friday, which still feels weird to say even now. On Friday, we woke up knowing that we were going to get to go see some F1 cars on track again, hopefully. After being woken up a couple of times the night before, after FP2 took place, basically behind closed doors. But obviously we were staying on the strip, and so you could still hear the cars blasting down that back straight along the strip. So we got woken up a couple of times thanks to that. But all in all, day one at least finished with cars going around track, but definitely not the way they wanted it to. So going into day two, a lot of nervous apprehensiveness was going around, definitely for sure, as we made our way back to the circuit in the evening to see FP3 and qualifying. Now, FP3 basically went off without a hitch, a little hiccup there towards the end, but nothing that kept them from doing what they needed to do and getting prepared for qualifying. So in between sessions, we actually got basically an entire session under our belts. Things were starting to look up a little more, and that headed into qualifying at midnight local time. Very, very late night for us. Vegas definitely threw off our sleep schedule. We are still recovering from our sleep schedule that we picked up from Vegas, but that's just because, when these sessions start at midnight and go until 2 a.m., and you're not getting back to your hotel until, talking 3:30 a.m., and you're not falling asleep till about 4 a.m. I mean, it feels very Vegas, but at the same time, it will take a toll on you by the time you leave. But absolutely no issues whatsoever. Qualifying was absolutely amazing to watch. It was so interesting. Vegas is still definitely like every other track. If you've been to an F1 qualifying session in person, you have no idea what's going on most of the time. You're relying a lot on what you can see on the video boards and what you see on track, which usually means your knowledge is very, very limited. But qualifying went off without a hitch. It was very exciting. You could tell that the temperature definitely dropped a lot more from FP3 to qualifying than it seemed like it would. I mean, it was a very sudden switch, and so I think a lot of teams were struggling specifically with that. But qualifying was absolutely electric. Charles Leclerc ends up taking pole position. Carlos Sainz, P2, before he, obviously his probably unjustly applied 10th-place grid penalty took effect. And which elevated Max Verstappen up onto the front row. We saw a double Williams Q3 appearance and Logan Sargent's best qualifying result of his season as they finished P6 and P7, which actually ended up being P5 and 6 after Carlos's penalty. So that was very, very exciting. We saw a Haas into Q3. I was losing my mind at that for sure. Definitely been a minute since we've seen Nico Hülkenberg kind of show out with the type of qualifying we've been able to see to him. So Saturday, see, I did it already. Friday, qualifying was absolutely amazing, and I think it got a lot of us really excited for the race on Saturday nights, just because the pace of the Ferrari definitely seemed like it was going to challenge Red Bull by the time it ended. So let's move on to the final day. Now, the biggest change during the day from Friday to Saturday, race day, was definitely the amount of people that were in Vegas and around Vegas as the day was going on. We actually woke up pretty late. We didn't try and wake up early or anything. We woke up about midday and actually spent a good chunk of our non-F1 time at the Wynn, waiting in a line for the Matt and Tommy from the P1 podcast. We're holding a fan meetup at the Wynn, and so we actually ended up waiting around there. Got to meet them. They were lovely, lovely people. I don't regret spending that time at all. They were super nice. Obviously, no wheel, and took time to take pictures and briefly talk with every single person in line. And so that was lovely to see. And after that, effectively, we kind of just killed time. We went and got some food, killed a little time, and made sure to wait until 10 p.m. race time. Now we're going to cover the race itself in the next section. We're going to do a quick version of quick hits, but the race absolutely electric. The way that the track ended up working with the weather and the tires and the setups and just the funkiness of the grid set up for a very exciting race. And even when you were there, you could tell that something special happened, and it definitely did not go the way a lot of people were really expecting it to. The sphere was a lot of fun during the sessions. I think my favorite one was the classic smiley face, the all yellow emoji smiley face. They ended up putting a Vegas Grand Prix themed helmet on it, and it would follow the drivers as it was heading through the sphere section, which actually was really fun to watch. As there were yellow flags and red flags, the sphere would light up with graphics indicating those, which was really interesting, and just cycled through some F1 style graphics as well throughout the sessions. And so it was a lot of fun. We actually ended up getting really nice seats. We were at the top of the grandstand in the sphere section, so we actually could see all the way from the hard braking zone after the first DRS straight along the long left-hander, and then the weird left-right chicane style thing in the sphere section, and basically until they exited that whole section. So we got to see a lot of action, and actually ended up being quite an exciting little spot. There were some opportunistic overtakes that were happening there, and we got to see a lot of side-by-side action at the same time. So our seats ended up actually being really, really nice. Obviously, by the time the race ended, Max ended up taking the win, Charles P2, and a Sergio Perez P3. There was no track invasion after the race was over, which I kind of didn't like, but it made sense because they ended up pulling the drivers all the way over to the Bellagio fountain section, and then pulling them all the way back for I don't know. It was a weird thing. So there was no track invasion, which was a little disappointing, but at the same time, it was still a lot of fun. We ended up staying at the track, not necessarily as long as we could, but definitely long enough to take some pictures, see the fireworks that happened after the podium celebration, before we made our way back to the hotel and completed our last night. Our final day there actually ended up just kind of being a bit of a recovery day. Our sleep schedule was officially messed up, and our energy levels were very, very low. We ended up just kind of relaxing in the room a little bit. I spent a majority of the afternoon and evening downstairs in the casino, playing some games, having a lot of fun, before we ended up just hitting the hay a little early and waking up and heading home on Monday afternoon. So it was a lot of fun. Definitely no regrets in making our way over there. We definitely paid for it, both physically and monetarily. It was not a cheap trip, to say the least, but we knew we wanted to go and be there for the first Vegas Grand Prix in this run. We're probably not going to make our way over there next year, but it was so much fun, and we have no regrets about it at all. I would highly recommend it. If you enjoy Vegas and that kind of style of entertainment and that style of city, I think it's second to none. It was so much fun. We definitely had no regrets. And if it ever works out to go again, we might make our way over there again. But for now, we'll stick to the U.S. Grand Prix and trying to make that one our primary Grand Prix. But that's what it was like to see the re-inaugural F1 race there in Vegas. We'll go ahead and we'll jump straight into our quick hits, and we'll run through this one pretty quickly, like I said at the top. Let's jump over there and do that. So let's go ahead. Let's jump into our quick hits, or what I'm going to call this time our really quick hits, just because we already talked about a few of the things here. I already touched on the drain cover catastrophe, the F1's sort of lackluster response. Really, just the one thing that impressed me the most is that it actually did end up being quite a weekend under the lights of Las Vegas. The circuit and the action and the atmosphere of cars running through the strip was unbelievable, and it's hard to describe even with words. And so, what a weekend under the lights of Las Vegas. There probably needs to be a dialogue of, was that the best race of the year? I mean, there's definitely reason to talk about it and potentially think that. The on-track action we saw, especially there towards the end with Charles versus the two Red Bulls, absolutely incredible to see. I did not see action like that many other times this year. Obviously, like I mentioned, another Max Verstappen win. I don't think anyone is too surprised by that. But along with it, it wasn't, him driving off to the tune of a 10-second win or anything like that. There actually was a battle at the beginning, at the front of the pack, Charles and the two Red Bulls going back and forth, basically all race long. Some timely safety cars helped the Red Bulls and also weirdly helped Charles at the same time. But another Max win, a battle at the front, that dive bomb, that absolute lunge by Charles Leclerc there on the final corner, effectively, of the last lap. He saw a weakness that Checo was braking a little early after making a mistake earlier in the race, and he sent it from, I believe, 17 kilometers back, it felt like. Then got it stopped by the apex, and actually, Max had actually slowed down to try and give Checo the tow to help protect him from Charles before Charles made that lunge, and so he actually ended up kind of towing Charles to the line to take P2. It was the move potentially of the year. It was an incredible move. He got it stopped all the way through the final little, that little left, right, left section on the run towards the line. It was one of the most incredible moves I've seen this year, and definitely is going to be talked about for a long time. Another thing that happened during the race is obviously Lando Norris's crash. Obviously, we're extremely thankful that he ended up being okay, but he actually had a very dramatic crash going into the, I believe it's turn 12. A bump upset the car. He ended up going into the barriers pretty hard. He ended up actually going to the hospital for further evaluation before being released, thankfully, and he ended up being okay. So thankfully, nothing too bad came of that. We saw a potential Esteban Ocon masterclass. I think he started P18 or something like that and ends up finishing P4. What a run from the Alpine driver. He effectively just swapped positions with Pierre Gasly, which I'm sure Pierre is loving. But at the same time, what a race from the Alpines. And then we're going to end our quick hits section off with Williams' luck absolutely just running out at the worst possible moment. The best qualifying we've seen from Williams, where they were looking absolutely rapid all weekend long. They got super unlucky with the safety car, the timing of the last safety car. They had just pitted just a couple of laps before, and it gave everyone ahead of them a free pit stop. And at that point, they effectively were just running out of the points for the rest of the race, unable to make up the rest of the ground. So both of them finished out of the points when it was looking very good that they were going to be potentially on for some really, really good points as they battle for P7 in the Constructors title. So I think that runs out our quick hits. Let's jump straight into our weekend winners and losers. We're not going to spend too much time on these. I think the weekend winner actually might be, even though it was a really tough finish, Logan Sargent is what I went with. This is the first weekend that I think we've seen Logan truly bond with a circuit and actually put in the type of performance that I'm sure Williams is willing to look at and is excited to see. He's been kind of having these, up and down weekends basically from the beginning of the year till now. But this is the first weekend where you can really look at what went wrong and see how it wasn't necessarily his fault. It was just poor luck with the safety car timing. Alex was also caught out by it, and even Alex couldn't recover all the way back into the points. And so he didn't even have that go against him. So if you look at it from a really high level overview, I think this is a weekend that Williams and Logan can look back on fondly. The only question is now is can he continue to grow on this and potentially get re-signed for Williams next year? Because as of right now, he still has not. So hopefully that happens, and hopefully he gets to use this as a point towards him rather than against him. Going on to our weekend loser, I've gone for Carlos Sainz, not necessarily, because of a full weekend thing, but it's because of his pure sheer unluckiness with the drain cover, getting the 10th place grid penalty, a lap 1 in turn 1 incident where he ended up, again, just being just so unlucky, but still came home to finish P6. The Ferrari looks very, very rapid all weekend long, and it's a real shame that we didn't get to see 2 Red Bulls and 2 Ferraris fighting at the front. I think that battle at the front goes very, very differently if Charles has his teammate there with him, just like Max and Checo did with each other. And so this is just going to come down to one of those classic what if type weekends for Ferrari, but they looked very, very good. And Carlos, even with all that who went against him, still had a very solid finish here in this one. So it's more of just a loser just because of that what if. So we may never know. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it now. All right, let's finish this thing out with reviewing the predictions that I made before the weekend began. We'll start with my pick for biggest positive surprise. I went for Alex Albon, hopefully dialing into this Williams hype. The Williams should have and did perform very, very well around the Las Vegas circuit. It was just unfortunately the just unluckiness that they experienced with that late safety car, as I already mentioned so many times, just really kept them from capitalizing on the pace that they had. They qualified very, very well. I think the best dual qualifying for Williams in a very, very long time. It's just very unfortunate that that they just couldn't do it, and all it did is really just leave me with no point. So at the end of the day, I'm sorry, Alex, you look super good, but I can't give myself the point here. Moving on to the biggest disappointment, I went with Alpine. Now, it's always risky to go for an entire team on a particular weekend, just because when things like this happen, you can't give yourself a point. And it also seems to be that why is it always on the weekends where I pick Alpine to be my biggest disappointment that they show up with an absolute masterclass? Pierre Gasly putting a P4 on the grid in qualifying only to end up at the back. Not good, but good for my prediction. But then Esteban Ocon, who is out in Q1, ends up making his way up and finishing P4. So no point for me here. Alpine, stop putting in bangers when I predict you to be biggest flop or biggest disappointment, please. My qualifying predictions, I predict a Charles Leclerc P3, a Lando Norris P2, and a Max Verstappen pole position. Obviously, this did not happen. We end up getting 1 point out of 3 here, just because when I predict a driver to be in that top 3, but they're in the wrong position, I give myself a half point. Charles obviously ends up taking pole. Max ends up starting P2, and Lando unfortunately was actually knocked out in Q1. So that is a 1 out of 3 moment for me. Moving on to the race podium. This one I almost cooked. I almost cooked to the T if I had replaced Lando Norris with a certain Monegasque driver. I predicted a Max Verstappen win, ding, a Lando Norris P2, and a Sergio Perez P3. Checo obviously ends up getting P3, Max 1, and Charles ends up coming home P2. So, and Lando obviously, once again, happy and grateful that he's okay, ends up finishing, he doesn't end up finishing at all. So a very close. But 2 out of 3 on my race podium and nailing the positions as well on 2 out of 3. I'm not going to complain about too much. So let's see. And then moving on to our final prediction, our Haas prediction from the race weekend. I predicted both cars out in Q1 and pain from start to finish. How I justified that to myself before the weekend didn't end up panning out. Obviously, both cars out in Q1 did not happen thanks to the heroics of Nico Hülkenberg in that car. It was a lovely qualifying session for Haas, as it always seems to be. So no points for my qualifying prediction and pain from start to finish. The problem is that Haas actually did have a pretty okay weekend. Like the Ferrari, they light up their tires very, very quickly and energetically, if I do say so myself. So they actually had a pretty decent weekend, but not enough to do well. But at the same time, I think they did well enough that I can't give myself the point for this. So it's an 0 weekend for my Haas predictions. And if you tally all of those up, I end up with 3 points out of 10 total. Not one of my better weekends at all. But these happen sometimes. It was a pleasure to be there, just in person. Anyway, so if my predictions end up being wrong, but I had fun there, I'm taking that as a win. But guys, I think that wraps it up for me here. The F1 season is coming to a close very, very quickly. Going to the Las Vegas Grand Prix was an absolute pleasure and a privilege to go and see this stuff happen live. It's our first away race we'd ever been to, having only been to the US Grand Prix 2 times. And obviously it's our home race. We live an hour and a half away from the Circuit of the Americas. So it was an unbelievable experience to go to the race in person, go to our first away race, and get to see all the excitement happen live in front of us. But that's going to wrap it up for me here. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single upload to the channel. I'm excited to go into this final round of the season and then finally our season recap, where we'll go over our season predictions and talk about what went on in the 2023 season. That's going to wrap it up for me here, and I'll see you in the next one.